Some people don't need you, not as a wound, not as a wall, as a fact. They wake up on a Saturday with no plans and feel nothing close to panic. Silence doesn't chase them. Weekends alone don't feel like punishment. They've built something on the inside that most people spend their whole lives searching for on the outside, and they found it quietly, without announcing it. You've met someone like this. Maybe you're still thinking about them. There's something disarming about a person who carries their own calm. They show up with warmth and genuine interest. They laugh easily. They're present. But beneath all of that is a steadiness that's hard to name. A kind of groundedness that doesn't shift depending on who's in the room or who's paying attention. Here's the part most people miss. When someone like that chooses to spend time with you, it means something. They are not there out of habit, fear, or the dull ache of loneliness. They are there because they want to be. That's not a small thing. That's actually everything. But take them for granted. Treat them like a backup option. They won't argue. They won't beg. They won't send the third follow-up text. They'll just stop. And you'll spend a long time wondering what happened to someone who never needed you to begin with, but chose you anyway. If that sounds like you, drop "I choose me" in the comments. Let's get something straight right away. Being comfortable alone is not the same as being broken. It's not a defense mechanism built from too much heartbreak. It's not a polished version of loneliness dressed up in independence. And it is absolutely not coldness wearing a calm face. People who are genuinely at ease with solitude are not running from the world. They're not hiding. They are, in the truest sense, complete in a way that most people aren't taught to be. Because most of us are taught, from the very beginning, that completeness comes from other people. Think about it. From childhood, the message is everywhere. Find your person. Build your circle. Don't be alone. Aloneness gets framed as a problem to solve, a symptom to treat, an awkward phase between relationships. So when someone shows up who genuinely doesn't feel that pull, who can sit in a quiet apartment on a Friday night and feel not lonely, but free, people don't quite know what to do with them. They misread it, almost every time. The most common mistake is assuming that someone comfortable alone must secretly want company, that their solitude is really just waiting in disguise. So people don't take their boundaries seriously. They assume the quiet person will always be available. They assume there's room to push, to cancel, to reschedule, to make them the backup plan. Because surely, they reason, someone sitting alone at home has nothing better going on. That assumption is where everything goes wrong. Here's what's actually happening inside that person. They're not waiting, they're living. They've developed what the philosopher Montaigne described as the ability to truly belong to themselves, a kind of inner richness that doesn't depend on external validation to feel real. Their contentment isn't a performance. It doesn't require an audience. It exists whether anyone else is around or not. Psychologists draw a sharp line between loneliness and solitude, and the difference matters enormously here. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted isolation, its absence felt as hunger. Solitude, on the other hand, is chosen aloneness experienced as peace. It's the difference between starving and fasting. One is suffering, the other is discipline, even nourishment. People who have made peace with solitude have done something quietly radical. They've decoupled their happiness from other people's behavior. And that, more than anything else, is what makes them so difficult to manipulate and so easy to underestimate. They don't chase. They don't perform. They don't shrink themselves to fit into spaces that were never built for them. They simply exist on their own terms. And when you meet someone living fully on their own terms, genuinely self-contained, genuinely at peace, the instinct for many people is to test it. That's where the real story begins. There's a particular kind of carelessness that people fall into with self-sufficient individuals, and it almost always follows the same pattern. It starts small, a cancelled plan that gets a gracious response. A text left on read that doesn't trigger an anxious follow-up. A missed birthday that passes without a confrontation. And because there's no pushback, no visible hurt, no dramatic reaction, the person on the receiving end of all that grace starts to make a quiet, dangerous calculation. They're fine with it. That's the thought. Not spoken out loud, maybe, but felt, acted on, and so the pattern grows. The plans get cancelled more often. The texts become less frequent. The effort, which was never enormous to begin with, quietly dissolves. Because when someone shows no distress, it's easy to assume they feel no distance. It's easy to mistake emotional steadiness for emotional indifference, to confuse they're not reacting with they don't notice. But they notice everything. That's the thing about people who spend significant time inside their own minds. They are extraordinarily perceptive. Solitude sharpens your attention to the world in ways that constant noise and distraction never can. When you're not always seeking the next social hit, you start to see patterns clearly, including the pattern of how someone treats you when they think you won't say anything. They see the shift. They feel it. They just don't perform their feelings for your benefit. This is what most people misinterpret as passivity. It isn't. It's discernment. There's a fundamental difference between someone who can't assert themselves and someone who chooses not to waste their energy on conflict they've already decided isn't worth having. One comes from fear, the other comes from clarity. Here's the brutal irony of the whole situation. The very qualities that make these people so easy to take for granted, the lack of drama, the absence of neediness, the graceful acceptance of disappointment, are the same qualities that make losing them so final. You've been training yourself to believe that no reaction means no limit, but there was always a limit. You just couldn't see it from the outside. Think of it like this. Imagine a door with no lock and no visible hinges. You push it open day after day. It swings easily, no resistance, no noise, and then one morning you push and it simply doesn't move. Not because something broke, because someone on the other side decided. There was no dramatic moment of decision, no single event that crossed a line, just a quiet accumulation of small disrespects, of lazy effort, of being treated like an option by someone they had chosen deliberately, and at some point the math simply doesn't work anymore. The poet Maya Angelou said it plainly: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. People who are comfortable alone have learned, often through experience, to take that advice seriously. They believe what they see, and they act accordingly, not with anger, but with something far more decisive. The silence is the part that haunts people. No blow-up. No long message at midnight detailing every grievance. No dramatic unfollowing or public declaration. Just a gradual cooling, a warmth that quietly withdraws. And then one day you reach out and realize the energy on the other end has changed entirely. Not hostile, not wounded, just done. It doesn't make sense to most people, because most people process hurt differently. They argue, they plead, they give second, third, fourth chances. Sometimes not because the other person deserves them, but because the alternative, walking away, feels too costly. Aloneness feels too heavy a price to pay, even for self-respect. But for someone who is genuinely comfortable alone, that calculation is different. The alternative to a bad relationship, whether romantic or otherwise, isn't suffering. It's just Tuesday. It's their natural state, a state they have already made peace with, already built a life inside of. So the decision to return to it doesn't require enormous courage. It just requires honesty. And that is a power that most people never develop. Carl Jung wrote about the introvert's relationship with the inner world, how those who are energized by solitude build an interior life that is rich, textured, self-sustaining. For these individuals, withdrawing isn't retreat. It's return, it's coming home, and home for them is a place of genuine peace, not a consolation prize for failed connection. This is why they don't issue warnings, not because they're cruel, but because they've already had the conversation inside themselves many times, over many months. By the time they go quiet, they've already processed the grief, the disappointment, the loyalty they gave that wasn't matched. What looks sudden from the outside has been happening slowly, privately, on the inside. There's also something else at work here. People who are comfortable alone have, almost always, a deep and functional relationship with self-respect. Not arrogance. That's a different thing entirely. Arrogance needs an audience. Self-respect is quieter. It simply says, I know what I deserve. I've experienced what it feels like to honor myself, and I will not stay anywhere that requires me to abandon that. When someone has that clarity about their own worth, they don't need to win the argument. They don't need acknowledgement. They don't need you to finally understand why they're leaving, or to feel bad enough, or to apologize the right way. Understanding isn't a prerequisite for their peace. They can leave without resolution because they've already resolved it within themselves. That's the part that stings the most, isn't it? Not just that they left, but that they left cleanly. No loose ends they need you to tie up. No part of the story that requires your participation to be finished. You don't get to be the one who provides closure. They already gave it to themselves. And they moved forward, quietly, without drama, without looking back, toward the solitude that was never a punishment to begin with. It was always a sanctuary. So where does it come from, this quiet, unshakable self-possession? It doesn't arrive fully formed. Nobody is born with it. It's built, usually slowly, often through the kind of experiences that teach you, the hard way, that other people's presence is not the same as other people's care, that being surrounded is not the same as being supported, that a room full of noise can still be one of the loneliest places on earth. People who have made genuine peace with solitude have usually passed through that disillusionment. They've sat with the ache of it. They didn't numb it with busyness or distract it with people who weren't good for them. They stayed with it, turned toward it, and eventually, sometimes surprisingly, found something on the other side of the loneliness, themselves. Not a curated self. Not the version dressed up for other people's approval. The actual self, with its real preferences, genuine opinions, and authentic rhythms. The self that knows what it thinks before being told what to think. The self that can sit in a quiet room and feel, not hollow, but full. This is what psychologists sometimes describe as secure attachment to oneself. It's the internal working model of a person who doesn't require constant external validation to feel stable. Their sense of worth isn't borrowed from whoever is currently paying attention to them. It's a structure they've built inside. And because they built it themselves, no one else can knock it down. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke described solitude as a kind of homecoming, a return to the essential self that gets lost in the noise of constant social performance. People who are comfortable alone have found that homecoming. They visit it regularly, they trust it, and they carry it with them, even in crowds. That inner foundation is precisely what makes them so difficult to manipulate. Guilt doesn't land the same way on someone who isn't haunted by the fear of abandonment. Social pressure loses its teeth when your self-worth isn't tied to other people's opinions of you. The threat of loneliness which is the invisible force that keeps so many people in dynamics they've outgrown, simply doesn't work on a person who has already befriended their aloneness. This doesn't make them cold. If anything, it makes their warmth more meaningful because it's entirely voluntary. When they give you their time, their attention, their loyalty, you are receiving something genuinely chosen, not something given out of fear or dependency. There is a purity to that. And when they love, really love, it is from a position of wholeness rather than need. They are not looking to you to complete them. They bring a complete person to the table. The relationship becomes an addition to a life already worth living, not a rescue mission for a life that feels empty without it. That's a different kind of love. A steadier kind, built on want rather than need, on choice rather than desperation. And it comes entirely from having first learned to be alone without suffering. So here's what all of this means, practically honestly for you. If there is someone in your life who is comfortable being alone, a friend who never chases